Welcome to High Point University's How to Land That Job series, part of HPU's commitment to fostering life skills and preparing students to render value in the global marketplace. Today's episode features David Horsager, CEO of Trust Edge Leadership Institute and HPU's Trust Expert in Residence.
Before we delve in, Mr. Horsager, can you tell us what being a trust expert is and why trust is important?
Well, I don't know if, I guess a trust expert, I didn't know I was until, I think it was Forbes said you were the most researched, or somebody said you're the most researched on trust in North America on this topic. I think, what might make you an expert is doing authentic research, but actually what makes you a thought leader, I think, isn't just original research. It's actually taking thought or research and applying it for them. Like, what's this mean to them? Mm-hmm. Nobody cares unless it's what does it mean to you now? So it's just like a speaker that gets up and tells their story about how amazing they are and they climb Mount Everest. That means nothing unless I can take and do something with it. So I think, that's, at least when we take expert to thought leadership, it's applying something to your audience and thinking about them. Yeah. As far as what the first question, which I'm passionate about, is why is trust important? I believe, and I guess I'll kind of jump back in because maybe only one or two of you are here this morning, so sorry to be redundant for you, but I believe a lack of trust is the biggest cost you have. I believe after my grad work, and all the work we've done now across 6 continents, across industries, I believe if you see trust, you see the core issue as a trust issue, you're able to solve the real issue. So I said it this morning, you don't have a leadership issue. The only reason you follow a leader or not is trust. You don't have a sales issue. The reason people buy or not is something to do with trust. You don't have an innovation issue. The only way to increase innovation on his team is increase trust in the team. Then you get people sharing ideas. Increasing learning in this classroom. There's one way to do it. You have to increase trust either in the content, the teacher, professor, or the psychological safety or trust of the room. Only when you increase trust in one of those three things will learning improve. Even the biggest diversity study out of Harvard basically shows diversity of most kinds tends to pit people against each other in some way unless you increase trust. And only then do you get great and research-based benefits out of diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, but you have to deal with the trust issue. So why trust? A lack of trust is the biggest cost you have. It's always the leading indicator. And it is always the core issue. And that's why trust. One more for this group would be marketing. How do I amplify a marketing message? There's only one way to amplify a marketing message. You have to increase trust in the message. And when you start to do that, then you get more of what you actually wanted. So if we can see it as a trust issue, that's why I wrote the last book, Trust a Leader. The newest book is people kept solving the wrong problem. Let's deal with engagement. Let's deal with this. Once they dealt with trust, they got more engagement. Once they dealt with trust, they got a higher net promoter score. Once they dealt with trust, they got lower attrition. And, increasing trust always affects the bottom line at the end of the day.
That's great insight. But then how do you build that trust, and what kind of frameworks can leaders use, or even students who are going into the career? How do you build that trust? How do you foster an environment of trust? So
tonight we're going to talk about career and all this stuff. But first, we got to hang our hat on the framework because everything comes back to the framework. So, because how many of you were in the session earlier today? Okay. So, with apologies to you, I think we better start at the beginning. I'll just save them and I'll throw some other frameworks up later. Basically, there were 8 kind of traits that came out of the research. 8 specific traits. They're represented by C words, but don't kind of think of them as kind of a motivational list of C's. 8 ways that trust is built in a brand, a leader, an organization, a global government. Doesn't matter what, it always comes down to these 8. So number 1 was clarity. And I could talk about each of these for a day at least. And the first one I could talk about for 4 days. So I call them pillars in the books. Of course, they spit out of research just as, traits. But so people trust the clear and they mistrust or distrust the ambiguous, right? And they also mistrust or distrust the overly complex. So number 1 is clarity. And most people think they are when they're not. Marketing experts think they're clear when they're not. It's so much work to be clear today. It's an enormous amount of work. So we have frameworks for building trust, or building clarity that builds trust. Number 2 is compassion. We trust those that care beyond themselves. Compassion is trusted. Okay, you got them? You taking notes? Because when I come back to you, you're going to know all 8 and you got them without, boom, locked in. Okay, good. Number 1 is clarity. Number 2 is compassion. We trust those that care. Number 3 is character. We trust those that do what's right over what's easy, character. Number 4 is competency. So what was your name? Hannah. So I might trust Hannah because of her character and compassion, but not trust her to give me brain surgery, right? Because of competency as far as I know. And you might trust different people for different things. I might trust Tiger Woods because of his competency on the golf course, but not for something else, right? So competency matters. This is why it's so important for you to learn how to learn fast, because competency, staying fresh, relevant, and capable is going to be critical in the new economy. So competency. Next pillar is commitment. We trust those that stay committed in the face of adversity. That's where the framework for how to rebuild trust is. And accountability also is there, which we might talk about later. The next pillar is connection, the ability to connect and collaborate. We tend to trust people that are willing to connect and collaborate with others. If they aren't willing to connect or collaborate, we find siloing in companies or an unwillingness to share resources for the betterment of all. The next pillar is contribution, which really the number one word out of this research funnel, this is really important, is it's results. We trust those that contribute results. You can't just have compassion and character. You don't contribute the results I expect or ask for. We got a problem, right? And finally, consistency. Sameness is trusted, for good or bad, right? I said it this morning. If you're late all the time, I absolutely trust you to be late, right? The only way to build a reputation is consistency. Whatever you're doing consistently, I'll trust you for. You come in and you're disheveled every time unprepared, I'll trust you to be unprepared. But you can be trusted for great things too. So reputation is built on consistency. A brand in a company is built on consistency. Only consistency. If you're inconsistent, the brand is weak. So that's the 8 pillars, and they work together. But I do believe, this is why it's so important, how you build trust matters, because at the core, what we found is it's always one or a multitude of these 8. That's why it's really critical you get these 8, at least areas down, because it's not an engagement issue. I even jokingly, even with Dr. Payne, talk about how it's never a communication issue. Never, ever, ever. At the core, is it really a communication issue, though? Communication is happening all the time. Clear communication is trusted, unclear isn't. Compassion is trusted, hateful isn't. High character is trusted, low character isn't. Consistent is trusted, inconsistent. Got it? Okay. That's the brief overview, so that's how you build them. So now under those, we have loads of frameworks for how I do that tomorrow morning, right? How do I actually do that? Build clarity for that. It could be mission, vision, values, priorities, expectations. It could be ODC method of how I have clear communication. We can talk about wherever we go today, and we'll share a couple.
So those are your 8 pillars. And then for our students that are going out and trying to land that job, how are we going to take these 8 pillars? You told us how to build the trust, but how do we apply it every single day and show up to work and become that thought expert and like that thought leader that we want to be?
So I just thought of a few ideas. So those are a couple questions. One is, how do I get a job, land a job? The other is, how do I keep a job, maybe? So first of all, I'm just going to kind of riff here on this, because it always comes back. Number one, if you amplify those, if you're absolutely clear in the interview about certain things, it helps you get the job. If you show high character, if you don't have high character, you're out the door. Right? We saw this happen at Wells Fargo when they had to let go a load of people, and they were incentivizing against trust. So, if you're willing to connect and collaborate, when you show in a interview a story of your willingness to connect and collaborate, you might get hired. When you show results, like in my space, there's a lot of I do speak about 100 times a year, so that's a part of what I do. But in our company, what we're really trying to do is develop trusted leaders and organizations and solve some of the biggest challenges, from corruption issues in East Africa to attrition issues to all these things. So the difference I can just say, and hired in a job for me as a speaker even, compared to a lot of our NSA colleagues, right? People, let's just say, it's happened plenty of times, there's a speaker. They're a speaker, they think they're a thought leader, maybe they are, maybe they aren't, but they speak. And they're really amazing, and they're really powerful, and they're really whatever, and they climb Mount Everest. And the problem is, I'm not going to do that. So the most inspiring thing to me as a listener is something I can do tomorrow, right? A takeaway I can have. But the bigger thing there is when I can show, well, if you use our framework, in this example, we tripled sales. That's a result. That's contribution. In this example, we lowered attrition by $4 million. In this example, somebody said they saved their marriage. That's personal, right? But any of these, if I can do this, that sold over this motivational speaker. That's how we get paid more and more often than most people in our industry, because we have to, but we built this having to deliver results. Does that make sense? So I didn't, someone else could have said, I got a standing ovation. I made people laugh more. Do you think the CEO wants, they might like that. They like a standing ovation. They like this crying, tears, happiness, all that. But do you think they want that, or they want this, the person that brought them a framework that they could triple sales on? They want this. So what does that mean for you? What that means for you is you go into the interview, and if you can share, without saying I, well, I was a part of this team, and what we did was this, and market share went up for us, or our, whatever it is that you've done, or, if you can show that in a humble way, that this result happened, that's a way of showing the contribution pillar, right? The results pillar. So that's one thing. Use show, like, I'll do it simply, and then you can apply it to hiring. In marketing, if I want to do a simple, we have several assessments that we use. But if I want to look at a marketing message, we think about this all the time. Okay, we're going to put this marketing message out. Well, how do we know if it's trusted or not? I'll go through the pillars and just 1 out of 10. 1 out of 10. Is it really clear? I mean, super clear? 1 out of 10? That's about a 9. Okay. Does it show our character? Yep. Does it show compassion for the people we're trying to reach? It's a 9 out of 10. Does it show, does it connect with our audience? Usually that's smiling people in the picture. If you're marketing, if you have a choice between smiling people and the product or the skyscrapers or the world, choose smiling people. Smiling people are bought from way more. Why? Because we connect with people. Connection, does it show our result? Oh, 4 out of 5 of this. This happens. Results happen. And is it consistent or on brand? If I just go through the list of 8 and go 1 out of 10, gut check without our big, deep assessments, I know I've got a stickier message. I have a few other ideas that I just these are just out of my head on hiring, because I know we were going to talk about this. Number one, always think about trust as the issue, though. What your job is, if you want the job, is to build trust. So it is not, what does it mean it's not then? It's not to sell yourself. It's not to leave yourself memorable, necessarily. It's not a lot of things. If you go into it thinking it is to build trust, you will think about it differently. Here's an example of that from the compassion pillar standpoint. Sorry, I'm just going without question. Is this okay?
Yeah, that's fine.
Are you where we want to go?
Yeah.
Just cut me off and say, hey, I got a different question. You're off the rails, dude.
I'm just thinking, yeah.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So, one example. So, 25 years ago when I started speaking more, I was often, it was before the 4 kids, I was scared to death to go on stage. Sometimes I was even sick to my stomach. I would be backstage. My wife would traveled with me then when we didn't have kids. And she's like, David, stop. Just love them. They can tell when you love them. And my first time or second time in a kind of East African area with machine guns all around and 3,000 people, I'm going up to meet the president, the vice president, and she can tell I'm scared. She was with me then. And she just squeezed my hand. Voices, just love them. They can tell when you love them. I remember the first time I went into the biggest lockdown, I don't know which compound of the biggest mutual fund company in the world. And I'm meeting with the top 8 people up in a locked space that they need to build trust, but the guy's sitting right there that sets the markets for the day. If they're off by a half a penny, I mean, it's they're worth more than Kenya in assets, $3 trillion in assets. And I'm going in there and I'm like, I'm sweating and I'm getting driven in this black armored car or whatever. And she texts me, remember, she knows what I need. Just love them. They can tell when you love them. Turns out it's the same with you. You go into that interview. It's like, okay, just love them. Build trust with them. Do this with it. When you're just thinking about yourself, people can tell. Can they not?
Yeah.
And so, okay, so that wasn't even here. That was just from what somebody said. So a couple ideas. One, think about trust. Number 2, if you go into an interview, if we're talking about hiring a little bit, self-awareness is huge. So I asked somebody today at the lunch meeting with you about what her strengths were. a strengths finder strengths. She knew immediately, and I knew, she named the top 3 strengths. I knew those strengths would be valuable for a sales type person. Now we all have strengths, they're all different, but I know I want certain strengths for certain roles. So self-awareness, I don't know what all you do for assessments, but here's a few I would think about. I ask all the time when I'm interviewing someone, what are your top 5? Strengths finder is so common in our world, even though I don't agree with every part or the use of every part of it. It's valid when it's used correctly. That's it. You should know your strengths.
Yeah.
You should know, maybe you want to know Colby test, because for certain roles, I want to know if you're going to be a quick start or you're going to be operational. For certain roles, if you're going to join with an entrepreneurial team, I might want to know if you're integrator or visionary. You can do that free test online.
Yeah.
I might want to know, maybe people still want to know Myers-Briggs or DISC. But let's just take strengths. Here's how you can get interviewed when you know your strengths. You can be not arrogant. Here's what I know about my strengths. Here's why I think that would fit here. I have, number 1 is responsibility for me. Number 2 is this. I think that would fit with this role that you're looking at, right? So it's not, hey, I'm really good at it. I'm the best. You hire me. Please, 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 please. It's no. See these? Okay. This seems to fit here. I think that would make me good at this. Make sense? So when you know that, so create number 1 or 5 or whatever we're at, self-awareness. Second for hiring that I think would be valuable. So think about the perspective of the hirer. So one great book on this is a friend of mine, Patrick Lencioni, The Ideal Team Player. Who's that written for? That's not written for ideal team players. That's written for me to hire the right people. But you should read it because you want to be the right person to hire. It talks about the ideal team player is made of 3 things. They're hungry, in most, especially mid-small companies. Hungry, humble, and smart. And what does smart mean? Mostly in that book, it means EQ, life skills. That's why you have a 1-up. EQ way more valuable than IQ, right? So in most roles. So I want to know humble, hungry, and smart. And now there's a big push today in the hiring market to be in favor of the employee, not the employer. Still, if you want to be hired at the right place, you need to be hireable. What do I need to know as a buyer? Really, we want to create a culture and family and blah, 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 but what do I need? In the healthiest, the best companies, I need that person to be worth 5 times their cost. So if you're a $100,000 employee coming out of college, I need you within a half a year, at least within a year, I want you making $500,000 in revenue for the company. Now, that can be that as an EA, that can be that. Now, in lower companies, it might be only $250,000, but I need you to make that. You need to think of, instead of thinking, you need to think of how can you be worth that. If you can show me how you can be worth 5 times wages, I'm hiring you tomorrow. So what's the number 1 thing that we're worried about? What's attrition cost? What do you think attrition cost is in most markets? 2.5 times hiring costs, probably? That's about that. So if you're a $100,000 employee, if I lose you and I wanted you, you just cost me $250,000. I don't want to lose people. Does that make sense? So, so I'm checking on hungry, humble, and smart, and we're checking against our values in our company. But one of my biggest fears is that you're not going to actually work hard. That's actually the fear of many employers, that you're not going to be diligent, that you're going to be, that you're asking me, you come in and you're asking me for, what are your benefits? What are your this? What are your that? If you really want the job, do everything that you can to show you're not entitled. That doesn't mean don't find out about that employer and make sure they're fair. Make sure there are a lot of things. Make outside of that, but in that interview, to get to the next level, do everything you can to not come across as entitled. You have to find out that. Find out so it's fair, so that you'll be safe, so that your voice will be heard, so that all those things.
Do your homework beforehand.
Yes, of course. But a lot of times in a first interview, someone will ask me, what are the benefits and how many time off do I get? If they're asking that first, not what can they give, they're not a right fit for our company. We're real missional though. If you want the job, what else? Ask for the job. Most people don't get because they don't ask. So you asked about, let's tie it back into what you asked about, and I'll get to some of these later. You asked about thought leadership. I'll give you a great example of what happened with thought, how you can right now be a thought leader and show it. So this young man wanted to work for me. We didn't really have a role. We kind of had a sales role. We could hire him for, he wanted to sell. Well, actually, there's about always a time for a salesperson if you get the right one, right? Mm-hmm. So we'll make a job for you if you're going to sell. So he wrote his senior thesis on servant sales, serving the person. It was something like servant leadership sales. Mm-hmm. He knew it fit. He'd done his homework. What's trust about? What's this about? Yeah. He did his whole senior thesis on it, brought me the paper and said he wanted a job. We gave him a job anyway. Mm-hmm. He got a job. What did he do? For him, it wasn't writing 3 books and doing 20 years of research. That's a piece of thought leadership. He understands what that is. That aligns with who we are. That was one way to show it. Mm-hmm. So I'll share these later.
Yeah. What about your own experience as a thought leader? Like, how did you, like, what experiences led you into this role that you have today, where you're running, your research and all these books that you're writing? Like, how did you get here? What?
It's a lot of miracles. Okay. So are any of you looking at being entrepreneurs? Okay. So let's talk about this. So Lisa and I, my wife and I, I was director of a youth and family organization in another country, Arkansas.
Country.
We love Arkansas, actually. But Missouri and Arkansas. It comes out of one of the biggest Christian sports camps in the country. I ran the year-round, you could call it kind of this leadership piece with college students and stuff. So we moved back to Minnesota to start this. And down there, we had lived at a place on a golf course and blah, blah, blah. We took every penny we had to start this company in 1999. And by that October, we had $1.40 to our name. 80 cents in the home account, 60 cents in the business account, just to keep them open. And we found a place to live that was about half the price of an apartment that we could find. It was the basement of 86-year-old Clara Miller's home. And her basement, just so you know, had no bathroom, no kitchen, and no windows. It did come with black mold on the walls, so that was good. We did not know it was illegal to live in a windowless basement until 2 years later when we moved out. So we lived there for 2 years, and we would go up 2 flights of stairs and share her bathroom we could use. And she had one little shelf on half of one shelf of her fridge that we could put stuff in. And that's how we started. And we started by praying, and we started by, I would be up in the morning and work till 11 or midnight, and up in the morning and work till midnight. So I'm just saying that's what it was like back then. Not everybody has to have that journey, but it was a load of sacrifice and these kind of things. So what happened, I was still, because of what I did down in Arkansas, I had been asked to speak a bunch down there, even at different things, youth events, college things. And I built this leadership curriculum because of what I'd done there. And so I can remember even being asked already to speak at one of the military academies with that. So that was a little interesting. Yeah. So it was significant. That was way back, 2000, I think. But basically, I had this epiphany because I was asked to speak at more and more corporate things on that work for some, even as a young, late 20s, I think, is all. And it was valuable, and it was valid, and it was good. But what happened was I had this epiphany, just kind of like that issue they think they have. It's not a leadership issue. I think they don't trust each other. Yeah. And that sales issue doesn't seem like a sales issue. It seemed like they don't trust each other. And then I just started seeing it as trust, and that led to my graduate work. I started looking into trust, and back then there wasn't any books, or almost, in this space, in business, there was kind of like Oprah therapy types, but in business and leadership, no one was looking at trust to speak of. Almost nobody. So I was researching the research, and there was almost nothing on it. So then I started going into it deeper. And that became interesting to people more important than me. Yeah. And they said, okay, people need to look at this. Then we used it in a company, and that first company we used it somewhat deeply in, only 600 person organization. They said they saved 2 to 4 million in attrition costs in 9 months. And then the first book became a Wall Street Journal bestseller. There was a lot of miracles to all that, but one thing led to another. And the thought leadership, you could say, research does it. The books then did it. And then for us, ongoing. So not just more books, but like now we do annual study out of the Institute, which just sets us apart significantly from bigger names than us. And we also had to build it on results. So are there big companies we're against that do kind of this light training, and where maybe they work with 600 companies a year, we might work with 6 deeply. Even if I spoke at 100 events, I mean, we had to change attrition, or we had to change. I mean, we built it on case studies of change. So what's happened now is, the Harvard Business Review calls and asks for an article written, or things have changed a lot, and there's just a lot of things beyond me that I just have to be grateful for. But doing what you can do is writing papers and then books and doing studying. One thing I would say about thought leadership too is, one of my biggest competitors, as an example, didn't write their own books. They got books ghostwritten. People can tell they're not passionate. I am passionate and deep, because I'm doing it. I'm seeing it. And people say it all the time, like, it's different. It comes right out of you. It's like our passion for things. But we feel it because we did the work. And that work, I wish I was where I am now, 25 years ago, 20 years ago. I thought I would be way faster. I thought the first book I'd write in 2 months, and 2 years later, I'm still not done. I mean, but that work now was so worth it, and it's paid dividends to actually do the work and feel good about yourself. Look in the mirror and say, it was not that I did everything. I had help. I certainly had editors, but doing it yourself. I think the tendency, at least when I was your age, maybe none of you, is to try to do something quick. Take the quick journey. There's not a quick journey to research. There's not a quick journey to thought leadership, saying you're a thought leader, right? But there are 2 different ways that are valid. One is research. The other is real experience. So if you take a friend, Patrick Lencioni, he was a real management consultant that had real experience. And he even says, well, you guys have taken trust research to the next level. But it's not that his way of looking at the world isn't thought leader. He is. And it's from real experience. Right. Yeah. But we get to combine those, and that's been really valuable for us.
I mean, a lot of it, I think, goes back to trusting yourself to know that even when you were living in that basement, you knew that you were going to make it out of there, and you were going to
I didn't always know.
No, but you were hopeful in that way.
Absolutely. I am an eternal optimist. Oh, poor Lisa, my wife has followed me no matter what. I think she's grateful now, don't you think, Isaiah? So my 17-year-old's here taking a visit on the campus, and thanks for hosting us. But I think, boy, some of those years, I mean, now things have changed dramatically, and we are in a whole different place. But that is both belief and consistent perseverance. And I'll tell you, in the first decade, we lost everything about 3 times. And we did not really have a tipping point till 2010. Like, it was a decade. The first decade was almost, on our knees praying we would get something for the mortgage. And then, it was so that research phase like that. Now, I'm grateful things have.
But then you had an amazing partner that was trusting of you and supporting you.
One of the best decisions you can make in life is if you're someone that gets married, marry right. Because Lisa, her belief, her willingness to stick with it, it's a massive part of it. She's even jumped in several times. So now we've had, when we've had key people leave, we had a really key person that his chief operating officer, she'd been out, 4 kids, she's not involved as much. Running home 4 kids in 5 years, one at a time. That's, that's crazy. So we lost our chief operating officer really quickly. And we still have a great relationship, but his mother tragically quickly died at 50 years old.
Oh my goodness.
So he jumped into the family business, their family business. Jumped out of ours. It was he knew everything, and he jumped out, and that was really tough.
Yeah.
Because he was, this was several years ago, but she jumped right back in to helping, jumped right back. We've had 3 big shifts probably in the last decade, and she's jumped right back in helping, and is a massive part of the organization. Even now, she'll come by, she just helps the culture, she'll gifts and birthdays, and just kind of, it's a great team effort, even though I would say she's not involved strategically, but she is. I mean, at night we're talking about this, and
yeah. So what effect does having what your personal life affects your professional life? So building that trust and even using this framework besides your career in your personal life is going to, improve your professional life. Would you agree with that statement?
Of course.
Yeah.
And the problem is, of course, I preach this and teach this, and I'm totally imperfect at it. So there's times I wish I would have do that's different with my kids. And I know what to do, but not doing it. You have habits and challenge. I wish I would do this different with a client. I wish I would do this different with Isaiah can talk about how imperfect I am, certainly. But but still it brings you back to okay, I can do that differently. It brings me back to the framework of what to do. And it has guided us in many ways. Or our kids even have guided us. One time we were, I think my oldest daughter was 5, and we had this. One of the things I teach is even at home having clarity of value. So we call them tenets. Okay. So we have Horsager tenets, our family tenets that we want to live by.
Cute.
Yeah. So and by the way, if you do a value exercise, we're much bigger on phrases than words. A word is not as sticky. Integrity, whatever. But having a phrase be the same on stage as off. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. It turns out it's way stickier and more actionable generally. One of ours was be generous. Well, there was a time I was thinking we were going to trade in our Suburban because I was flying more, and I thought it's getting a little older. Lisa's going to be home alone with these 4 kids and whatever. And our daughter, kids can tell, by the way, when things change. They didn't remember when we were in that basement and nothingness, right? And she said, 5 years old, she said, hey, we had our value, or these tenets on the dining room table. And she said, well, our values be generous. This person needs that. Shouldn't we give it to them? And we ended up giving the Suburban way instead of trading in because she held us to our values. So sometimes they'll help guide you.
Hold you accountable for that.
Hold you accountable. Yeah. They still try to hold us accountable, don't they? Yeah. And it generally helps, and they are generally right, which is the bummer.
So according to your research, an increase in trust correlates to positive impacts on output, morale, retention, productivity, innovation, loyalty, and revenue, to name a few of these things. So what kind of is the business case for trust based on these things? How is it affecting these things? And why do you think that you're seeing these positive relationships between trust and all of these outputs?
Well, I think it gets back to why it's always a leadership. It's not a leadership issue. It's not any of these issues. When trust goes up, that was the leading indicator piece. When we saw trust go up, then all these things happen. So you can think about it simply. If some of you are in sales, how would you ever speed up a sales channel? If I don't trust you, what do I have to do? 20 pages of garbage. If I trust you, what can I do? I don't even have to shake your hand. It's like that. Well, I trust you, it's done. The speeding up a channel of communication or a channel of sales, you can see how fast it is where I trust you. I said it earlier today, but you email or text someone you trust, it's done like that. Text someone you don't trust, you got to relook at it 50 times, right? Ooh, how are they going to take this? How are they going to take that? I mean, it's so where there's a lack of trust, it's a massive cost. In our country, you can see the efficiencies we have as much as we have enormous challenges. There's a country in Africa that I have never put my credit card in and received it back. It only took me twice to lose my credit card. But in America, I have never not received my credit card back when I've gone to an ATM machine. Our financial institutions are actually quite high trust compared to many, and we have enormous benefits because of it. Our stop and go light system is so incredibly trustworthy, we have almost no accidents because of it. And what does that create? Incredible efficiency. Green, I go, nothing happened, just boom, right? If there wasn't, what would happen? You'd all get to the light one. Should you go? She'd go, I'm going to go, right? So the efficiency goes up enormously, and you can look at that in every way. Yeah.
Great. Our president, Dr. Nita Cobain, he talks about the difference between unproductive success and productive failure. So as a leader and trust expert, someone who's worked with many different businesses, you have seen both of these things in your work and in your personal life. So what do you think is key to manage the failures to turn them into successes in the future?
Well, as far as, there's a lot of ways we could go with that question, and there's so much good there, but this is the thing I would talk to you about quickly. Trust yourself enough to fail. Trust yourself enough. What is it so bad? Ask this question. What would happen? What's the impact of this in 300 years? Because some of you are so worried about the impact of that in a few years. And what would have happened if we would have not built this business? I probably would have been able to do something else. I wondered, but try it. Go for it. Trust yourself enough to try. And then, of course, there's plenty written about this, but failing as fast as you can, iterating as fast as you can, trying something else. And a lot of the failure, the way that sometimes has been written about really is wrong. It's not failing. It's iterating. It's like, that doesn't work, that doesn't work, that doesn't work. Just try that, try that, try that. That's what we've done. I mean, you look at even in I don't know how many times we've really created a new business with this trust word. Maybe the one similarity is people have still asked me to speak. But the rest of the business, the measurement tools, the way we do things, you think of the pandemic, I was speaking 100 times a year. I spoke almost 200 times a year in the pandemic because we created a 5-camera studio overnight, and I was able to speak in Bangkok that day. And one time I spoke 5 times in one day. In the old days, that would have been once, right? And so now I still really, for our deeper work, like in person. And there's some research around all that. Let's see here. Was any of this relevant to that? I'll get to this when you're,
I mean, you're talking about being able to speak 5 times a day, and that's like a really relevant topic right now with virtual remote work, with remote school, and we're shifting our MBA online. So how can you still instill that trust and place the value on trust and building those professional relationships when you're not able to see the person face to face, when you can only see, shoulders up, you're not seeing the body language, you're not able to connect with them or like really feel out the energy in the room. Like, how are you going to build that trust in that situation?
Can't see the color of their slippers. So we talked about this earlier today. So there's a few things that happened in the pandemic. First of all, in the first 2 months, trust in senior leadership went up, mostly, because of about 3 or 4 things. One, they were communicating way more than they ever had with their staff. The average number of calls after the pandemic was twice as many as Verizon said, twice as many calls as on the number 1 call day, which was Mother's Day in the past. Immediately, there was more communication. Number 2, instead of being up in the ivory tower, they were seen as real people. The CEO was seen as real people. The cat jumped on their keyboard too. Their kid 4-year-old ran in their undies behind them, just like they started to see them as human, right? Number 3, introverts were much more listened to than they'd been before, because in a Zoom room, it turned out introverts were willing to share in certain ways that they wouldn't do in a boardroom. And then it started to tip back. It was just not enough. There was something that you couldn't do. And so now what we know in events space, at least, is in-person is number 1. Number 2 is virtual everyone. And number 3 is hybrid. People that keep trying to push hybrid, it's difficult because someone feels left out. So what do? We have challenges. How do we deal with this? As far as teaching it, we need to make a way of consistent communication. We need to have a way that people can be heard. It can be 2-way, not 1. So kind of this Kajabi, like just do something in online, take a quiz, do something, take a quiz. For non-life and people skills, that can work. How do I turn a tire? I mean, you can go to YouTube, right?
Yeah.
How do I do this little thing? I put 5 nuts on, I screw them like this. Okay, I got it.
A tutorial.
Exactly. But people and life skills need people back and forth. So there has to be a way of listening to them, and there has to be a way of going back and forth. People also want measurement tools in that. They want to see gaps and close them. They want community, and they want some sort of live support. So even if live is virtual. right? So that they feel supported, so they can, in our program, even though they get, we'll talk about, since we're talking about education here, we'll talk about our 6-week certification process. 6-week certification process, they do a bunch on their own, but there's a call every week and 2 on the last week with the cohort. There's an opportunity every year for people to come in person. That's much better, much stickier. So you need a place for community. You need some space for two-way. And let's see, what else was I going to say? No, okay, so now let's jump for a second for all those of you leading in virtual. What have we noticed? Leading in virtual, there's 2 sides. Some will say, look, it's working. People can trust us. See us employees, we're really good. You can trust us, just let us do our job. And yet, many are working way less than they were in person. And they are, many of them, doing their laundry, playing with their dog, and not doing all they should do. On the other, so you have this side that some people have high integrity and are doing better when they're unsupervised. And you have this other question of the senior leadership saying, well, are they or aren't they? How do I hold people accountable in a virtual environment? So 2 quick ideas that are simple here are, in virtual, we have to connect more often, not as long necessarily, but we have to connect more often. And number 2, we generally have the healthiest situations when we create accountability based on results. So instead of, however you can measure it, instead of worrying about if they're doing the laundry or not, it's simply on, are they getting the result we asked for? If that takes them 2 hours, fine, we're paying for it. If that takes them 14 hours, that's what we're paying for. But they're paid on the healthiest environment. We've seen more communication and results only workplace, ROW, if you've read the book. And number 3, some space where people come human to human. So even when we're working with Takeda Pharmaceuticals, they're like, I've got to get, got this person managing, this person in Japan who's managing, this person in Vienna, and we're like, they tried 3 times over this to get us all to Vienna to work on, so we'd get at least the face-to-face, even some, and COVID hit again right then, Delta hit, but they'll do it soon, and they got it sometime you want to touch
build that
face-to-face
relationship,
if possible.
Yeah.
Because some things, the research shows it, just don't happen virtually. Yeah.
Okay. Do you have any concluding thoughts about landing the job?
Are we done?
Hiring? Well, we want to open it up to
let's
questions from the students.
Open up to questions. Let me. I did think of 2 things. I'll end with one at the very end. But one idea when I teach entrepreneurship, one idea that came to mind is, okay, this is not my idea. It's kind of creditless. Like, people don't know where it came from, so I can't give someone credit. We'll just say it's Dr. Hall's. Okay, so this is the problem. That's the problem. It's a big problem, right? That's your problem. How much do you know about how to solve that problem, personally? What's your name? Yeah? Jose? Yeah. Let's be generous. Jose, how much do you know how to solve that problem? Generous. Right there, right? More than I know. Okay? How much do the people that you know about how to solve that problem? If you could Google it, you could talk to that person, how much do they know? All those people. We'll be generous. Let's say that much. Right? That problem that we're thinking about in our head. Yeah? This much. So how much is unknown to all people in our sphere, your sphere? All of this. And you know what we find people do? They spend all their time whining and complaining about all this. When in fact, most people, people we work with, big problems, if they would list 1, 2, 3, 4, 7. Who's someone who's been through a pandemic before? Who's someone who's had this kind of big challenge before? Who's someone I know? What could I Google? Who's a resource? Where could I find someone? In these 7, by listing 7 people they could contact, they almost solved the problem right here. What does this mean for you? I want a job. I need a job. I want that job at wherever. Okay? Here's my problem. I don't know anybody at Amazon. I don't this. I don't that. I don't this. Let me put here. Okay, who's anybody that's ever where could I Google? Who's this person that I've heard of that touched Amazon? Where's somebody that in career services? Who's somebody that says this 7? You reach out to those 7. They'll give you somebody, ask for help, a referral, something that will solve this problem, but they came from here. Does that make sense? One other thing, I was thinking about one of my best employees that I gave a job to. What he did to me, this was way back, but he asked just after college, he said, hey, can I interview about your kind of work? I just was interested in knowing what it's like, what it's about. Basically kind of just, not about a job. By the end of that, I talked to him about hiring him for a job. And he didn't interview me for a job. He just interviewed me to learn about our work because he was wanting to think about what he's going to do after college. So
knowing who to connect with and like how to build those relationships and networks.
Networking, I mean, it's still, I did not get this. It's how so much is on relationships. Even me, I go back to my college, my university, my friends. I'll tell you the most impactful thing I got out of college. It was all relationships. My wife, professors that still help me today. I'm on the board of trustees of our university that I'm at. And number 3, and one of the most important, and it's very uncommon, I know, but a 4-guy accountability group that started my junior year. We started meeting every Thursday night, and we talked about how are you going to be. And by the way, you couldn't say, what can your wife do differently? What can you do differently? How can you be better as a boyfriend, as a husband? How can you be a better dad? We get it. We love each other, but we get in each other's grills, and we share the same faith. We share the same care. We all lead organizations now, and now 28 years later, we still meet. Same 4 guys. One of them I call every other day, pretty much. Like a little chat session. He's also on my board. Anyway, so yeah, questions, and then just save time because I want to share one thing for 4 minutes.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah. Right. One other idea, since no one asked the question while I was looking down. One question that we now ask in interviews, and it comes out of the Hungry Humble, the Lencioni book, is be ready for the not very good HR question of what are you bad at kind of thing. Like, give me an experience that shows how bad you are at something, right? And so what do people like, well, one of my problems is I just work too hard. It's like, right, It's like, so what we're looking for at least is somebody that is humble and learned from it and took responsibility. I would be ready with some sort of, when did you blow it? Because what I'm looking for every time when I ask any question around that, and we do it all the time now, is we're asking a question to try to find out that you took responsibility and that you learned from it and that you're imperfect and willing to admit it. That's a question. You're going to have to show things you did well. And if you can use a story format, that's good. But that question, we want to know on our team, I want to know you're humble. And what I'm also looking for is coachability. Can you be coached and changed? Because I'm fast moving. I love my team. We do all kinds of celebratory stuff. We have food, free drinks in our company, all these kind of things, like Diet Cokes and whatever's in the fridge. But I'm also pretty fast moving. So it can be a little direct. I want to be careful with that, but it can be direct. I want to know that they can handle a pretty fast-paced world without being too like it. Questions? Any questions? Yeah, I can say it back out loud if you don't want to get up too. So, you're
speaking of reasons new hires succeed or fail. We have this national C-suite of the executives of a college graduates of the workforce. So our undergrads, recent undergrads, since they're out for 5 years, haven't seen yet. Definitely make a copy before you leave, because a lot of the stuff that David was talking about is tough. Only 11% was lack of technical knowledge there. And how many of you done a mock interview before? Okay. Yeah. So when I debrief my students on mock interviews, I tell them that what they're doing is they're making an exchange under asymmetric information, meaning that you actually have more information about your quality as a worker than they do. And so they don't trust you yet. You've got to build trust in that 30 minutes, an hour interview by constantly sending different types of signals. And I boil it down to just two signals. I want you, and you want me. And I bet if you go through those 8 C's, you can tag those two signals, every one of those things. If you want to get granular, think about how you build trust with those 8 C's there.
By the way, this just made me think about two things. Number one, when I was just doing a big hiring, we used a search firm. They boiled it down to a certain number of people for our new sales leader. This guy wanted the job. Don't be afraid to say, I want this. I'm excited about it. I think a lot of people want to today be in a power position to think, well, I don't want to show I want it too much. I want them to want me. I'm telling you, you know who I want to hire? I want someone who wants to be a part of our mission and wants to be there. And I kind of want the person that wants to be there the most. So if you're, especially if it's an entrepreneurial, I don't know about Walmart and Amazon. It's a little different feel, I think, and I haven't been a part of a big company like that. But in our smaller company with this many people and offices where we can almost all see each other and it's pretty open workspace, I want someone who wants to be there. And this guy, Josh Stoll, wanted to be there the most. And he's fantastic. And he wanted the job. Now we wanted him too, ultimately. Something else that came to mind, something I was just writing on recently, kind of 5 whys what did I call it? 5 steps that create buy-in. Like, how do you get buy-in on something? How do I get buy-in? That's what you're really doing with a job. How do I get buy-in? So how do we get buy-in? Well, here's 5 ideas, if I can remember all of what I wrote on. One is empathy. Empathy. You know what? What's their problem? Oh, I know it can be tough hiring the right person. I can assure you that I'm going to do best to show you why I can be a fit for this. That starting is just, I understand. Or not even I understand. Don't act like you understand. If you don't, just say, I bet it's tough. Like, don't come in there young saying, oh, I understand what it's to be a hiring professional. You're not. But say, I bet it's tough. Just that empathy. Number 2, they buy on conviction. I'm telling you, if you're in a sales thing or any sales role, like, it's not, I used to say passion for this, but some people are too tritely passionate, like, or energy, like, it's like, you're weird, but they do buy on this energy or conviction. Like, you believe in this, don't you? I can feel it. Like, I have conviction about this. Number 2. 3, they buy on credibility. So you have some credibility, even if you're just like, hey, I'm a business major. I was in the sales club. I doing this. I think I'm ready for this kind of thing. Like, I've got some credibility. They buy in on 2 other things. You can email me for them. That was 3. That was pretty free of charge. So there you go. You got 3 out of 5, right? Yeah. Here's another idea under that. When you want to sell something to the CEO, instead of saying we need to change this, go with 5 whys. Here's why I think this. Here's why I think this. Here's why. If you go with enough whys to me, and if it's a narcissistic, selfish CEO, make sure one of those whys makes them look good. Am I not right? Say, hey, you know what? If you do this, you won't look like such a, you won't, you'll look good and people like you or you won't fail here or you whatever. If you can tie it to them, you might win. Yeah. And we all have to deal with difficult people. There's a thing that some people want to leave too quickly. They just want to give up on that because it's like it's not fair and they're jerks. And I want to not do that too quick because sometimes the most efficient thing I can do for the sake of the mission and the people we're trying to serve is actually work with the jerk. So don't just think you're going to work with all perfect people. I still remember my dad on the farm. We had this drunk drunk welder that would come work on our irrigation pipes and stuff. And one time, he just continually overcharged, and he said to us, and we were out there the whole morning, he said, yeah, I've been here since 6 o'clock in the morning doing all this, so he charged us for that. And my dad just said, he had this way of just like, are you sure you were here? I thought we were, no, yeah, I was then. He's like, and he just paid him. Because for us, the $100,000 crop was worth it, and getting another welder out to Wadena County, it's just sometimes you do have to just deal with it. You can't hold it. That's a whole nother story. Okay. Doesn't mean you should be different than that, but that's that. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
So I recently got asked in an interview what my expectations for like the salary are and
Uh-huh.
stuff. And like obviously I've done my research, I know the average is kind of what the company pays. So like I feel like that's always like an awkward moment, at least for me. And I'd love to hear your opinion on that. Like because we talked about like
Yeah.
humble.
Right. So I would like to, on that, this is what I would turn that to. I might turn that to humor. So here's what I would say, because I'm going to ask you that too, by the way, if you come in. And it is always awkward, almost always awkward. But I'm going to say, yeah, I'll tell you this. Number one, I really want to be here. Number two, I'll take as much as you'll pay me. I'd say something like that, like, I'll take as much as you'll pay me. I'd love to be here, but I'd like to, what are your expectations? I want to be here, but I'd like to know what you're going to offer. And that in that specific thing, you are in the power position right now. People are getting paid more out of college than they've ever been paid. So if you probably learned negotiations, always make them say something first. Now, they might have learned that too, and they're going to make you but really, and at some point, you say it. You say what you want. Have a number. Go in with a number that you're hoping for, and have it be, and when you say it, say, well, I was hoping for at least. I would be at least what you want. And what you want today, in my opinion, this is just free of charge. I'm not an expert on this, and you could ask, these guys would have better stuff to say on this. But on this, I haven't worked for anybody else for 2 decades or 3. So I'm not your best on this, but I do see it all the time. I would do the thing of, as much as you'll pay me, what do I was hoping that you'd give me some understanding of that. I do want to win here. By the way, I might even say, if you want to show your gumption, I might say, by the way, just so I can prove myself, will you bonus me on something I get done for you? If I do this, will you do it? Because people in non-sales roles will all of a sudden start you at a higher salary because you said that. So there was something else I was thinking about with pricing. The bottom line is you want to be able to say a number at some point, because what happens if you don't too long is you're too wishy-washy and you are too it's like salespeople. They always want to negotiate. Don't. You got to tell me even if it's a negotiation type business, there's got to be if you're going to negotiate forever, I just don't like you. It's too much. Just here's what it's worth. Sell them on value at some point. Yeah.
If you sell them on value early, you said, if you hire someone, they need to generate 5 times as much revenue for the year to work with.
Well, that's in some markets. That's what they're looking for, and you have a certain runway for that. Yeah. That's great. Many people would be even 3 times they would do. But and by the way, my executive assistant, she's not selling anything. She's worth 5 times revenue for sure to what we're able to do because of what she's taken off of me, right? So you have to think about how you're going to explain that. But most companies now, the best ones, if you read a lot, the Rockefeller Habits, all business growth companies, in fact, there's a move to not just price companies on EBITDA as much, but profit per employee. So it's the PPE, right? Yeah. Profit per employee is, so if I'm saying, okay, if I take the overall company, that's what Instagram on 12 employees sold for $1 billion. That's a big amount per employee, right? So if I can anyway, that's a key number in businesses that we're watching all the time and in ours. We want to get our profit per employee up. the healthiest business have high profit. Yes.
In your experience, since you've been in the industry for 20 plus years now,
Yeah.
do you think that companies or just organizations in general are becoming more trustful or less trustful? Because it's really interesting because I think that, like we hear so much about like fake news and like all
Yeah.
this stuff that's coming out
Yeah.
the internet. And in some ways it's
Yep.
harder to be
There's two
like
sides.
misinformation,
Yep.
but it's at the same time really easy. It's like you
Yep.
can get fact checked very easily,
Yep.
but then you can also hide things very easily at the same time. So what do you think it's becoming more?
I think there's both sides. I think some things are much lower trust for real. Now the data would, so as an example, institutional trust is down steeply. And that, let's just take what people are saying, because we don't know, like you said, you don't know for sure because they weren't fact checked back then, some things. But in before Watergate, about 80% of Americans said that they trusted the government to do basically what was right for them. Now last time we did this study was 6 to 7%. I bet it's 2% now. Okay? A lot of institutional trust is down steeply. However, were my black friends and African American friends asked to think the good old days were good for everybody? What about the Native Americans? Was that so good for them? What about women over here? Was that so good for them? I think this idea that the good old days for you and I that are white males, we must be very careful to think it was better for all back then, because it wasn't. However, there are types of trust that are more and are less, I would say. So I'm going into a bunch of categories on both sides. I think, as an example, so I generally believe in free enterprise and some health to a lot of that. But to say that no regulations are good for us is totally not true. It's terrible. Look what happened to media. I'll tell you what's less trusted. Media. Hey, you know what? An idol of mine, Ronald Reagan, opened up things, but then Clinton opened it up even more. Both sides did it. And now regulations for media is less, and it's less trustworthy as a whole arena. I can't even define the two laws with the FC. What were the big laws that Reagan moved it, the needle, and Clinton moved it again. And so it wasn't really totally Republican Democrat, but in some cases, I believe we did need a little more regulation because now what do we have? I mean, you've got a bunch of junk on news stations. I mean, you've just got a bunch of junk that's not news. So in that way, certain things are less trusted because when they were more regulated, they actually, I believe Walter Cronkite, you guys would be able to speak to it more maybe, but I believe it was more true news for all. Would you agree? And it wasn't just that he was the most trusted person in America, as people said. I think he was. It was more trusted, news was. Yeah. You have to, so on social media front, to be really careful. You can get really myopic if you're not listening to a lot of different places. And I mean, there's a lot of people under rocks in their basements throwing darts at things they know nothing about. Yeah. And it's tragic. Yeah. Yes, ma'am. Well, that's a big question. Let me try to take it. So how basically, if you were at the earlier session, everything I do to get clarity about taking an idea to an action, I go how until I can do it today or tomorrow. So you got to get good at it, and you can watch the video or something on howing things. You how it until you can act on it today or tomorrow. So let's take clarity. Let's say that I want to get a promotion. Okay. First of all, I can have a goal, but what I want on my daily actions are only things I can do. It's not someone else. So someone else can give me the promotion. I can only do what can set that up for the possibility. So I'm going to how that. And so what would I do? My final how might be to go talk to my supervisor, manager, or leader and say, hey, I love this work. I would love to receive a promotion. How would I do that? And what do you think? I'm sure you want me to be at my best here. What would that look like? Like, what's a timeline you could help me set and outcomes that I would give you to show that I would be worthy of a promotion? That's one how. I might have that meeting. And then, of course, off that meeting, I'm going to how that to meet those, right? I'll say a couple other things about priorities quickly. One, in strategic clarity, you have mission, vision, values, priorities. We would say if you have more, this is Colin's work. If you have more than 3 push-forward priorities at any given time, you have 0. You don't have a priority if you have more than 3. The data from, I wish I could quote it, it's not ours, 1 to 3 priorities at a certain time, you'll accomplish 1 to 3 key goals. If you have 4 to 7, you might accomplish 1 or 2, and if you have more than 7, you usually don't accomplish any. So this is push forward. You might have to do other junk in life, but basically push forward priorities or goals at a given time. So you have to bring it down to 3. We kind of screwed it up anyway because priorities wasn't even a plural word in the English language 100 years ago, which you could only have 1 priority in Webster's, but boiling it down. So one thing that I think is interesting that people have come to on the weekly point is a lot of people that we saw manage the pandemic well, they took and went from 90-day quarterly goals or annual goals and went down to weekly. When change is happening super fast, you got to take you got to plant the flag. Maybe today. Well, I was on a call with General McChrystal. Very fortunate to be on this call. But he was talking about right early in the pandemic, we were talking about how do you deal with this kind of thing. If you don't remember, McChrystal was head of joint forces in one of the worst turns of the Afghanistan war, right? And so he said, well, one thing, we couldn't find Osama bin Laden. This wasn't working, that wasn't working. So we got to get it done. So they went from, in their case, longer term where everyone talked together to, he said, we're going to get 2,200 intelligence professionals across Europe, North Africa, and part of Asia, 600 wherever he was, if he was at the Pentagon, if he was over there, 600 his time, for 30 minutes, and anybody that has something to say about new intel is going to say it on that 30-minute closed call. Every time. And then they took 30 minutes, and then they took 30 minutes on a strategy for the day. And in very few days, they found Osama bin Laden, and a host of other things turned for the positive. Of course, later they turned back to negative, but for a time, he led us through the most positive time of the war in Afghanistan. And so in times of crisis, you have to pull back goals. In fact, he said to me, gone are the days of 1-year strategic plans. No way, a year, that's way too long. 90 days, Mac, we have a big bias for 90 days for the longest term, but anyway. So one other idea from the military, in times of crisis, VUCA, in times of volatility, VUCA, volatility, did you teach this? Volatility, uncertainty, complexity, ambiguity. So a CEO that went through was telling me how he was managing well in the midst of the pandemic, and he said in times of volatility, in the war college, we learned to, in times of volatility or complexity, ask 2 questions. Number 1, what can we do? And number 2, what can I do first? What should I do first? And the problem with what I saw a lot of people that failed in the pandemic that shouldn't have, that their industry went up. They said they spent most of their mental energy on things they could not do. Oh, Trump's going to win. Oh, Biden. Oh, this or that. Yeah. Know the world. You got to spend 15. If you're in leadership, you better spend 25% of your mental energy on what's going on in the world, your surroundings, your SWOT, and all that. But you just better spend 75% on what you can do it. Many people had that flipped, and they spent 75% whining about things they could not control, and only 15% on what can I do it, and they thought they couldn't do anything. And everybody that paused and thought about it, even so, one of our biggest, one of our clients, they run the biggest healthcare, the emergency room hospital in Minneapolis. They said, "What are we going to do? All the nurses had to get in hazmat suits. You remember down here? I don't know if they had to, but in the pandemic, they all had to get in hazmat suits." In fact, if someone had a baby, the wife had a baby, the husband couldn't even go in with them for the first several weeks. I don't know if it was like that here, but they couldn't even go in with them. So what happened is they have these patients, I don't know if it was cancer or what these kids have, but there's kids, 4-year-olds, 3-year-olds, 5-year-olds, that don't have to stay at the hospital, but they have to come in and get a shot every week. They have to get a shot, and that shot is powerful. It has to be administered by a nurse or a healthcare professional. So what happened? The kids came. The nurses are in hazmat suits. The kid looks, you know what a scary clown looks like? You kidding me? Ah! They ran away and screamed. But there's a problem. They have to have that shot. They can't have more than 2 weeks without it. Mm-hmm. So they said, well, what can we control? Well, they tried this. They, without the hazmat suit on, they took a picture of every one of those nurses smiling big. They made the biggest button you've ever seen. They stuck it on the heart of the hazmat suit. When the kid came to the door, in the sweetest voice that kid knew, the nurse said, remember me, remember me? And they got the shot. And they took it, no problem. So that was just like, well, what can we do? And very shortly after, they removed the hazmat suits. And we're over in time, and we can send you a video on seeds.
I was going to say, if you wanted to go over that really quickly.
Okay, very quickly. Here is one thing, if we've learned anything about what, if you're going to be hired or stay hired, be healthy. Be healthy in every way. I mean, you want to lose money in life? You want to have a bunch of stress, and it's not your fault. I'm not judging anybody. I'm just saying, as an example, divorce costs a lot of money and stress. And it's not, I'm not judging anybody, but being eating the wrong thing, it costs a lot of hours and sick time. A lot this is just from what we've seen from the research. What we've noticed is people, we started asking, what is it about people that actually can change a habit in life? And it's not that they go to some big motivational seminar. You can't believe all the people that go to a motivational seminar and get wall whooped up and do zero. Nothing. Oh, I'm so excited. I'm going to go. I'm going to do it. No, they get home. That's what happens. Okay? So what we notice is people that planted and cultivated their seeds, they were the ones that were actually able to stick, change a habit. In these years that you're going to overwork like I did from 6 a.m. till midnight. A friend of mine said, you've got all balls, 5 balls. They're all glass. Your family's glass. You drop that one, it's going to chip. Your marriage is glass. That one's going to chip. Your finances, you do some big stupid things there, that can chip. Your business ball, your work ball, that's rubber. It'll bounce back. And many of us treat our work ball like it's the glass ball and all the rest of them like they're rubber, and they all get damaged. Make sense? So, what are your seeds? Sleep. You don't think you need it, you do. Don't be arrogant with me. I don't sleep, I haven't slept, I only sleep 3 hours, I haven't slept for 7 years, whatever. I thought so too. I went a long time without much sleep. And I still have challenges with this, but when I sleep the right amount, my waist is a different size, my anger levels are different, it's a big deal. The next one is exercise. Now, you don't have to run a marathon like my wife does or whatever, but you need to move a little more, and you need to keep with it as you get older. Right now, you're not worried about it. I had to figure out ways, how can I just move a little bit more? And you can think about that. This one's way more important than this one changed my life. Eat right. I am not an expert at eating right. I'm not a healthcare expert. I am here saying, the doc said to me, well, I don't even know what I said this morning exactly, but I'll tell you a couple ideas here. He said, do you want to drive a junker or do you want to drive a Ferrari? Because we put different fuel in a Ferrari than we put in a junker. You're fueling yourself wrong. You better figure out what you're doing. And you're not going to be a high-performing, your system, you're a high-performing leader. If you're going to be a leader, manager, worker, you're going to be high-performing or low-performing. And we know low-performing, and by the way, some people that come in sick and have challenges, it's not their fault. There are genetic things. There's a host of other things. So you can love on them, but for you are responsible. There are many people costing their jobs and employers and everything else because they're not doing this. They're staying up too late, they're coming in, and they're living life half. And they're not doing these kind of things. When I started making myself eat 5 green vegetables a day, drink a gallon and a half of water a day, I could handle some ice cream, no problem. But this changed me. One of the ideas that I think was kind of funny, he said, you can't outrun a cheeseburger. I'm like, what do you mean? Well, if you take the big Wendy's cheeseburger meal right now, the whole meal with fries and the big Coke, 2,200 calories. I'm supposed to get that in a day. And by the way, if I think I'm going to go work that off on the treadmill, how many calories can I burn on the treadmill in an hour? And who has a full hour? How many calories? Maybe 600.
500, 600.
Maybe 600. Yeah. So I can't burn off the 2,200. So he said to me, this woke me up. He said, I'd rather have a healthy eater than a hamburger eating marathoner. Now, I'm still eating hamburgers, but he woke me up when he said, you're 90% what you eat and 10% your exercise. Keep exercising, but you gotta put the right fuel in. Mm-hmm. And if you can build a habit of the right fuel now, I'll tell you, you'll get more better jobs in life. Mm-hmm. The D is drink water, and the S is source of strength. I am not here to tell you exactly what that should be, faith, family, friendships. I'm happy to tell you what it is for me. But I am here to tell you now that I've walked next to presidents of countries, companies, and pro sports teams, that I see often leaders alone at the top. And if you're doing leadership alone, you're doing it wrong. And what I found also is people that get their life, their source of strength is the job, they're worse at the job. It's like speakers, right? You guys have seen speakers that have spoken on stage for themselves, as therapy for themselves. If you're doing that, if you're abusing the audience, that's not fair. It's not right for you to abuse. If you don't have a gift for them, get off the stage. You don't deserve the privilege of it. And that's the same with a lot of... Tom Landry, you guys remember? Do you remember Tom Landry? Wow, it's only us, right? Well, I'm from Minnesota. And so we've never won a Super Bowl, and we really don't have winning sports teams, so we have to find other teams. So in the 1980s, my other team was the Dallas Cowboys. The winningest coach at the time of Super Bowls. Now things have changed with things up in New England, but they'd won 5 Super Bowls, I believe. And Tom Landry wasn't just a great coach, he was a gentleman. If you watch the old footage, he's got a tie on, a fedora. He treated people like a gentleman. He was amazing. His players. You didn't hear things afterwards like we just lost our coach of the Vikings and all the truth comes out of how he actually treated people. You heard how he treated people, how he loved people, how he loved the game, and how he was a gentleman on stage and off stage when people were looking and when they weren't. And what I remember is Tom Landry, after an event, after a football game, the young reporter puts the microphone in his face and says, "What's wrong with you, Landry? Coach Landry?" When I interview other coaches after games, if they win, they're all excited. If they lose, they're swearing, they're mad. When I interview you, you're actually absolutely the same every time. You're totally even. What's your problem? Do you not care? And to that young reporter, Coach Landry looked at him in the eye and said, "I think it might be because I have my priorities in order. For me, faith comes first, family after that, friends after that. If I lose on Sunday, I got a whole lot left over." If you don't have something beyond the job, even when you create it with your blood, sweat, and tears as an entrepreneur, you'll be worse at the job. If you're going to get life from the job and not from faith, family, and those friends around you, you will have your job will fall at some point. Mm-hmm. That's just what I've noticed. So try to plant and cultivate your seeds. And there will be times when you don't get sleep and you have twins or you have a baby and that goes down. And there'll be times when you just need to have a bowl of ice cream because of that. But you got to keep coming back to these if you want to be better, even at work.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hey, good. Got the final word.
Yeah.
Thank you. All right.